Tonight we'll drift out among the comets, ancient wanderers of ice and dust falling in from the frozen edge of the solar system. You'll follow their glowing tails past the distant Oort Cloud, the great comets, falling stars, and quiet visitors from other stars. Now, let yourself rest. Tonight, imagine the sky at its darkest hour, a vast field of stars settling over a quiet world. The air is cool and still, and above you the heavens open, deep and unhurried, waiting for one soft traveler to appear. Slowly, near the edge of that starry field, a faint smudge of light takes shape. It is not a star, for stars hold steady points, and this glows soft and blurred, a pale feather brushed across the dark. Picture this small light gliding where the others stay fixed. Night after night it shifts its place among them, a quiet wanderer crossing the constellations, arriving without hurry from somewhere far beyond the familiar map of the sky. This is a comet, an ancient visitor made of ice and dust, born long ago in the cold outer reaches of our solar system, where sunlight thins to almost nothing and everything drifts in deep, unbroken silence. For most of its long life, a comet sleeps far from the sun, a dark and frozen wanderer no larger than a mountain, circling in the outermost dark on a path that can take thousands of quiet years. Now, drawn by the sun's distant pull, this one has fallen inward at last, crossing a vast gulf of space to reach the warmth, arriving here after ages away like a traveler returning to a half-remembered home. Consider how far it has come. The light you see left the comet minutes ago, yet the comet itself began its journey when the sun was younger, carrying frozen memory from the very dawn of the worlds. Here in the still night, let that thought settle over you. A body older than the oceans, older than the mountains, is passing overhead, silent and luminous, asking nothing of you but a slow, unhurried glance upward. Long ago, others stood where you stand now, tilting their faces toward this same soft glow. They had no telescopes, only open eyes and quiet wonder, watching a stranger glide among the steady and familiar stars. Imagine those ancient sky watchers wrapped in the cool of evening, tracing the pale visitor across the dark. To them, a comet was an omen, a hair of light, a sign written in the heavens by unseen hands. Some believed these lights foretold the fall of kings or the turning of great seasons, and so they watched all night, half in awe, weaving stories around the gentle stranger that had wandered into their sky. Yet beneath the old tales lay something true and lasting, a real body of ice returning on its own long clock, keeping an appointment set in motion before any of those watchers were ever born. Far out beyond the planets, the comet had waited in the cold for its slow moment to come, and now that moment is here, unfolding above you in the same sky those ancients knew. Notice how the light seems to breathe, brightening a little as the nights pass, its faint edges softening into a delicate haze that spreads outward like mist caught in the beam of a distant lantern. Somewhere behind that haze lies a solid core, small and dark and frozen, the true heart of the comet, releasing a whisper of vapor as the sun's warmth begins, ever so slowly, to touch it awake. Let yourself feel the scale of it all, the enormous quiet distances, the slow and certain motion, a single visitor threading its way through emptiness to appear, briefly, as a soft light above your resting head. Picture the world beneath it, hushed and dim, the towns dark, the fields silent, everyone asleep except the few who look up, and you among them, watching this calm wanderer glide through the deep of night. The comet keeps no schedule of ours and hurries for no one, moving at its own serene and ancient pace, indifferent to time as we count it, faithful only to the long orbit that carries it home again. Beyond the reach of our brightest lamps, it shines by borrowed light, catching the sun and scattering it softly back, a glow that has traveled unimaginable distances only to rest, for a while, in your quiet gaze. Consider how rare this meeting is. How many lifetimes may pass before this same traveler returns? Tonight it belongs to you, a fleeting companion in the dark, asking only that you watch and slowly wonder. Now let the sky hold you as it held those ancient watchers, the stars steady, the comet slipping onward, the whole vast dome turning with a slowness that loosens every knot of the busy day behind you. Breathe in the cool night air and let your shoulders ease. There is nothing to chase here, nothing to solve, only a soft light overhead and the long, calm constancy of a wanderer keeping its own quiet time. Over the coming nights we will follow this visitor closely, learning where it was born, how it wakes, and the shining tales it will unfurl, a slow journey through ice and dust and gentle light. For now, simply rest your eyes on that faint glow and let it lead you inward, down toward stillness, as the comet drifts on above a sleeping world and the night gathers softly, warmly all around you. Tonight, let your thoughts wander far from the warm ground, out past the planets into the wide dark beyond them. Somewhere in that stillness a comet floats, small and unhurried, a traveler made of ice and dust waiting in the cold. Imagine holding one in your mind, no larger than a mountain, often only a few kilometers across. It is not a star or a world, but a loose clump of frozen things, bound together and drifting through the endless night. At its heart lies the nucleus, the solid core of everything a comet is. Astronomers once called it a dirty snowball, and the name still fits, a soft mixture of ice and grit resting in the deep dark. Picture that ice more closely now, and know it is mostly frozen water, the same substance that fills your rivers and seas, only here it has waited hard and still for an almost unimaginable length of time. Woven through the water ice are other frozen gases, still and patternless, frozen carbon dioxide, the dry ice of gentle mist, sits beside frozen methane and ammonia, each one locked solid in a place colder than any winter. Now scatter fine dust and small dark grains of rock all through that ice. This is why some prefer to call a comet an icy dirt ball, for the dust and the frozen water are mingled together, not neatly apart. Consider the surface, and let go of any image of glittering white. A comet's crust is dark, darker than you might guess, as black as charcoal or fresh soot, reflecting almost none of the distant sunlight that touches it. Here is the gentle surprise of that darkness. Beneath the sooty skin the ice still hides, wrapped in a thin coat of dust that ages and blackens over the ages, like a shell drawn over something pale and cold within. Far out where the comet floats, the temperature falls toward the deepest cold. There is almost no warmth to stir it, so the ices hold their shape perfectly, sealed and sleeping in a stillness that has lasted an age. Slowly let the scale of that stillness settle over you. This little world has not changed in any real way since the solar system itself was young, and its youth was 4.5 billion years ago. Long ago, when the sun was newly lit, a vast disk of gas and dust turned around it. From that spinning cloud the planets gathered and grew, and comets are the small pieces that were left behind. Think of them as leftovers from that ancient morning, the crumbs of creation that never joined a planet. They scattered to the cold outer edges and stayed there forgotten, keeping to themselves in the silent dark. Because they settled so far from the sun's warmth, comets were never cooked or reshaped the way the inner worlds were. They simply froze in place, a natural deep freeze holding them still and unspoiled through all that time. Picture opening one in your imagination alone and finding the earliest recipe of the solar system inside. The ices and dust are almost exactly as they were when the planets were only beginning to form. This is why astronomers speak of comets so tenderly, calling them relics and time capsules. Each one carries, frozen in its core, a faithful record of the materials from which everything familiar was slowly made. Now imagine the numbers of them, far more than the eye could ever count, scattered through the outer dark. Most will never come near, content to circle in cold and shadow for spans of time beyond easy telling. Consider how gently they move out there, so far from the sun that its pull is only a whisper. A comet can take thousands, even millions of years to complete a single unhurried loop around its distant star. Somewhere in that slow orbit, nothing stirs the ice at all. There is no wind, no weather, no warmth to wake it, only the faint glimmer of stars turning past a dark and dreaming crust of dust and ice. Beyond the reach of the planets, the cold keeps its perfect promise. Water stays as hard as rock. The frozen gases never sigh into vapor, and the comet holds its ancient breath, undisturbed and utterly calm. Picture the dust within it once more. Grains far older than the ground beneath your bed. Some may have wandered from dying stars long before the sun existed, gathered up and folded into the ice like memories. Now feel how small a thing carries so much history, a body you could almost walk across in a day, holding within it the story of a whole solar system's birth, unbroken and softly kept. Here in the dark it asks for nothing and disturbs no one, a wanderer of ice and dust content simply to coast. Its stillness runs deeper than mountains, older than the oceans, steadier than any clock ever made. Slowly let the image of this frozen traveler rest at the edge of your mind, dark and small and silent, cradling frozen water and starlit dust through a night that has lasted since the beginning. Tonight, as your breathing softens, remember that far above you these gentle relics are still drifting, unchanged and unhurried, waiting in the cold, keeping the oldest secrets of the sky safe until their long, slow fall begins. Tonight, let your mind drift far past the last of the planets, out beyond the place where Neptune completes its slow blue circle. Here begins a realm so distant that the familiar map of the solar system simply fades into quiet, open dark. Imagine traveling outward for what would be thousands of years at the speed of a spacecraft until the planets are long behind you. Around you now stretches a vast and silent shell, the outermost edge of the sun's gentle reach. This is the Oort Cloud, a rounded haze of icy worlds that wraps the entire solar system like a soft, spherical veil. It does not lie flat as a ring, it surrounds us on every side, above and below and all around. Picture not one belt, but a great hollow sphere of frozen bodies, scattered at distances thousands of times farther than Neptune. Its faint inner edge and its far, cold outer reaches together enclose everything we have ever called home. Far out here, the numbers grow dreamlike and enormous. Astronomers believe this shell may hold trillions of icy bodies, each a mountain of frozen water, dust and dark, ancient rock, scattered thinly across an endless ocean of space. Consider how thinly these worlds are spread. Though they number in the trillions, the emptiness between them is so immense that any single one floats utterly alone, its nearest neighbor often billions of kilometers away across the dark. Here sunlight has thinned almost to nothing. The sun, which warms your face at noon, is no longer a disk at all, but a single brilliant point among the stars, the brightest of them yet only a star. Now imagine standing on one of these frozen wanderers and looking back toward the warmth of home. You would not know it as a sun at all. It is simply the brightest star in a scatter of countless points of light. Somewhere at the cloud's farthest edge, its icy bodies lie so distant that the sun's grip on them grows faint and thin. Out here, its pull is nearly matched by the slow gravity of the wider galaxy itself. These are the sleepers, the long-period comets, resting where they were born or gently scattered long ago. They have circled here in slow and enormous loops, each single orbit taking millions of years to quietly close again in the dark. Long ago, when the solar system was young, many of these icy worlds formed nearer the planets. Then the gravity of giant Jupiter and Saturn flung them outward, far into the dark, where they settled into this distant calm. Picture them now as they truly are, held in a cold beyond imagining, hundreds of degrees below freezing. Their ices have lain unchanged for 4.5 billion years, keeping the secrets of the sun's first morning. Beyond the planet's hurried dance, time moves differently here. A single orbit can span 1,000,000 years or more, so slow that in all of human history, such a comet has traced only the smallest fraction of its path. Somewhere at the outer shell, the cloud reaches a good part of the way toward the nearest star. Out toward the distance, light itself takes a year to cross. It is the true frontier where the sun's country meets the dark between the stars. So they wait, these frozen travelers held in a stillness deeper than any night on Earth. Nothing hurries them, no warmth stirs their ices. For unimaginable ages they simply float and turn and sleep on in the dark. Now and then, though, the quiet is touched. A distant star passing slowly through the galaxy over many thousands of years wanders close enough for its gravity to reach across the cold and gently stir the sleeping cloud. Imagine that faint tug arriving like a whisper, so slight it would take ages to feel. Yet it is enough to loosen a single comet from its ancient loop and ease it ever so slowly off its course. Consider, too, the galaxy's own gentle tide. As the sun and its cloud travel through the Milky Way, the pull of all those distant stars presses softly on the outer shell, a tide as steady as the seas. Under these faint and steady nudges, a comet's long orbit begins to lean. Its far, slow loop tilts by the smallest degree, and its path bends inward toward a warmth it has not felt in millions of years. Slowly, without hurry or alarm, the frozen wanderer begins the longest fall imaginable. It leaves the cold shell behind and slips sunward, a journey that will take it hundreds of thousands of years, perhaps far longer, to complete. Here in the outer dark, though, nothing has changed for the countless others left behind. The great shell holds its silence, and trillions of icy worlds go on turning, undisturbed, through the endless quiet as they always have. Picture the Oort Cloud then as a vast and sleeping reservoir, a nursery of comets waiting at the very rim of the sun's domain. From this shell come the rare long-tailed visitors that grace our skies. Every so often across the centuries, one of these ancient sleepers is nudged loose and sent gliding toward us, and so a comet you might one day see began its journey here, unimaginably far away in perfect stillness. Now let that thought settle softly over you. Out beyond the planets, wrapped in dark and silence, trillions of gentle wanderers are drifting in their slow, enduring sleep, waiting through the ages for their distant call home. Tonight, sail far beyond the bright inner planets, out past Neptune's slow blue orbit, into a hush where the sun has shrunk to a single brilliant star. Here begins a wide, flattened ring of frozen worlds, waiting in the cold and the quiet. Imagine this ring stretching from about 30 to 50 times Earth's distance from the Sun, a shallow disk of ice encircling everything you know. Astronomers call it the Kuiper Belt, and it lies in the same broad plain as the planets, spread thin and calm. Picture the light out here, faint and level. Sunlight that took hours to arrive falls soft on countless icy bodies, and none of them gleams the way a planet does, only a dim, calm glimmer scattered across the dark. Far from the warmth you know, these worlds are made of frozen water, methane and ammonia, ices that would turn to vapor nearer the sun. In this deep chill they hold their shape for ages, unchanged, unbothered, keeping their ancient form. Here the cold is almost beyond imagining, hundreds of degrees below freezing, and everything moves without hurry. A body this far out takes centuries to circle the sun once, tracing its long, slow loop through the outer dark. Somewhere in this ring turns Pluto, a small world of rock and ice with a heart-shaped plain of frozen nitrogen. Once counted among the planets, it is now known as a dwarf world, one of many frozen siblings. Consider that Pluto is not alone in its kind. Out here live Eris, Makemake, and Haumea, icy dwarf worlds, each following its own wide orbit, pale and remote, turning through the silence far beyond the reach of any warmth. Now let your mind rest on how these worlds move, unhurried and sure. They glide at just a few kilometers each second, a crawl by cosmic measure, so slow that from any single moment they seem entirely still. Beyond the tidy heart of the belt lies a looser realm called the scattered disk, where icy bodies ride steeper, more elongated paths. Long ago, Neptune's gravity nudged them outward, and they have wandered on stretched loops ever since. Picture one of these scattered travelers swinging far from the sun, then leaning slowly back inward across thousands of years. Its orbit is a long ellipse, tilted from the flat plane, a quiet outlier among the wanderers. Here in this belt is born a certain kind of comet, the short-period kind that returns not in millennia but in mere decades. Their journeys are brief by comparison, close enough that we may greet the same one twice. Imagine such a comet dislodged from its slow orbit, easing free of the belt and beginning the long fall toward the distant sun. It carries the belt's ancient ice inward, a small ambassador from the frozen edge. Slowly, these visitors thread inward through the planets, drawn by gravity's soft pull. They keep the memory of the cold outer ring in their frozen cores, the same ices they held when the solar system was young. Consider that the Kuiper Belt is a museum of beginnings, its worlds little changed since the planets first gathered from dust and gas. To study them is to look upon leftover building blocks preserved by the deep and abiding cold. Far out here, collisions are rare and unhurried. The belt is vast and its bodies few and far between, so most drift for ages without ever meeting a neighbor, each keeping to its own wide, lonely lane. Picture the belt not as a crowded field, but as a thin scattering across an immense volume, a few icy worlds spread through space so large that emptiness is the rule, and each body a quiet island. Now imagine standing on one of these frozen surfaces, if you could, beneath a black sky strewn with unblinking stars. The sun would hang there small and dazzling, offering light but almost no warmth at all. Beyond the belt's outer edge, the ice is thin and the orbits grow ever longer, fading toward the far greater shell that waits still further out. This flattened ring is only the inner threshold of the deep cold. Consider how many worlds may linger here undiscovered, too dim and distant for our telescopes to catch. Each year a few more are found, faint points of light creeping slowly against the fixed and ancient stars. Picture the belt turning as a whole, unhurried and enormous, its countless icy bodies all leaning the same way around the sun. It is a slow carousel of frozen worlds, wheeling through the outer night for eons. Here the passage of time softens into something vast. A single orbit outlasts whole human histories, and these worlds have circled quietly through the age of the dinosaurs, and long, long before, keeping their steady pace. Now let the belt settle in your mind as a broad, still ring of pale ice, glinting faintly in the last reach of sunlight. Nothing rushes, nothing burns, and everything holds its ancient, unhurried place. Imagine one of these icy worlds waiting there in the cold, someday to loosen and begin its slow journey sunward, to warm and awaken as a comet. For now it simply coasts, dark and quiet and whole. Slowly let your thoughts rest among these frozen wanderers, turning far beyond the planets in the deep and gentle dark. The Kuiper Belt keeps its calm, and you may keep yours drifting easy in the outer night. Tonight, let your mind wander far past the planets, out to a lonely place where a small ball of ice has just been nudged loose from its ancient rest. Nothing here rushes. It only begins at last to fall. Imagine that first faint tug of the distant sun, a pull so gentle it would take a lifetime to feel. Yet it is enough. Slowly, over centuries, this frozen wanderer turns and leans toward a light it has never truly known. Far out here, the sun is not warm, not round, only one more star among the countless others scattered across the dark. The comet cannot tell it apart by looking. It knows it only as the faint hand silently drawing it inward. Picture the shape of the path ahead, not a circle, but a long stretched ellipse, an enormous thin oval reaching from the edge of everything down toward the warmth, then swinging out again into the cold. Consider how unhurried this fall truly is. Some comets take thousands of years to complete a single loop. Others from the farthest shell may need millions. Time itself seems to slow out here in the great quiet. Here at the beginning of the journey, the comet is still utterly frozen, its ices locked hard as stone. It is dark too, a dim coal barely lit, drifting through a silence so complete that no sound has ever crossed it. Slowly, so slowly you would never notice, the wanderer gathers speed. Physics is simple and kind about this. The deeper it falls, the faster it goes, though for ages the change is far too small to see. Now hold the scale of it in your mind. The comet may spend century after century crossing a distance so vast that light itself, the swiftest thing there is, needs days and then weeks to make the same trip. Beyond the reach of the outer planets, the traveler moves through an emptiness with almost nothing in it. No worlds pass by, no dust storms, only the steady cold and the faint growing promise of a brighter star ahead. Somewhere in this long descent, the sun begins to change. What was a pinprick among the stars swells, ever so gradually, into the brightest point in the comet's sky, still small, still distant, yet unmistakably nearer now. Picture the years turning like slow pages. Generations of us could be born and grow old and rest again, and still the comet would be falling, tracing the same silent arc across the outer dark. Far below, unseen, the inner planets circle quickly in their bright small orbits, a busy little clockwork the comet has no part in yet. It keeps to its own vast rhythm, measured not in days but in ages. Consider the balance kept in that motion. Every meter the comet falls sunward, it will one day give back, climbing out again on the far side, spending centuries to rise as slowly as it once fell. Here the ice holds secrets it has kept since the making of the sun, frozen gases and ancient dust untouched by any warmth. For now they sleep on, and the fall carries them gently toward the day they will wake. Slowly the sun grows from a star into the faintest disk, a bright bead of light no wider than a distant pearl. Its warmth begins to touch the comet's dark surface by a whisper, no more than that, and still it comes on. Imagine standing on that frozen crust, if you could, and watching the sky. The stars would hardly seem to move at all, so smooth and steady is the glide, as though the whole sky were holding its breath. Now think of how many such travelers are falling at this very moment, each on its own long ellipse, each utterly alone, and yet all of them drawn by the same quiet light toward the same warm center. Beyond counting, the years accumulate, and the comet's speed builds from a crawl to a rush, though out here even a rush is serene, an unbroken coasting through a dark that never pushes back or slows it down. Picture the sun's disk finally taking on a real face, small and golden, casting the comet's own long shadow out behind it, sharper now than in an eternity. The cold is still deep, but the warmth is no longer only a rumor. Consider that this single plunge you are following is the slow half of a far longer story, a loop so wide that its far end lies out past the planets, in a dark the comet will not see again for an age. Here the ancient rhythm continues, indifferent and calm, needing nothing, hurrying nowhere. The comet simply obeys the oldest agreement there is, the gentle bargain between a small cold body and the star that quietly calls it home. Slowly the balance of the journey shifts, and the light ahead grows steady enough to feel. Somewhere in the coming reaches the ice will stir, but not yet. For now there is only the falling, smooth and endless and sure. Long ago this same descent was traced by comets our distant ancestors watched, and long after us it will be traced again, the loop turning on, faithful across spans of time no single life could hold. Tonight, let that vast, slow calm settle over you like a blanket. The wanderer is still falling, unhurried through the dark, its bright destination swelling ahead, and there is nothing to do but drift and rest and let it come. Tonight, follow your wanderer inward as it crosses the vast distance near Jupiter's orbit, still a cold and silent mountain of ice. For ages it felt nothing, but now the sun's warmth reaches it at last, and something begins to stir. Imagine that first faint touch of heat soaking into the frozen crust, so slight it would barely warm your hand, yet across the comet's dark surface, this whisper of sunlight is enough to loosen ices that have slept untouched for billions of years. Deep within, the frozen heart holds water ice, along with frozen carbon dioxide and other simple ices bound tight as stone. As warmth seeps inward, these frozen gases quiver, ready to slip free of the cold that has held them so long. Here the ice does something wonderfully strange. It never melts into a puddle, never flows as liquid at all. Instead, it passes straight from solid to vapor, a smooth transformation that scientists call sublimation, unhurried and clean. Picture a wisp of frost on a winter morning vanishing into thin air without ever wetting the ground. That same gentle passage is unfolding on a cosmic scale, ice becoming gas in the airless dark, skipping the liquid step entirely. Slowly, streams of freed gas begin to breathe outward from the warming surface, carrying loosened grains of dust along with them. Where there was only stillness, now the faintest exhalation drifts away into the surrounding emptiness of space. Because the comet is so small, its gravity is almost too weak to hold anything down. The escaping gas and dust do not fall back, they simply float free, rising off the surface and spreading outward in every direction at once. Now a soft haze gathers around the icy core, a thin cloud of gas and shining dust wrapping the nucleus in light. This luminous shroud has a name, the Coma, the glowing head that turns a dark stone into a living comet. Consider how this delicate cloud catches sunlight and scatters it back, so the whole head begins to glow with a pale, borrowed radiance. From a distance it looks like a fuzzy star, soft-edged and dim, brightening a little with each passing day. Far from tiny, the coma keeps swelling as more ice turns to vapor and streams away. A head that began smaller than a village can grow to span thousands upon thousands of kilometers, wider than the Earth, wider even than mighty Jupiter. Yet all this vast glowing head is spun from almost nothing, a cloud so thin it would count as a fine laboratory vacuum. The Coma is enormous and luminous, and at the same time gossamer, more empty space than substance, featherlight in the dark. Deep inside the Coma, hidden from view, the true nucleus remains only a few kilometers across, a dark and dusty snowball no bigger than a small city. The whole glowing spectacle flows from this modest coal-black heart at its center. Somewhere across that ancient crust, the warmth finds cracks and weak seams in the ice. Where a fissure opens onto a buried pocket of frozen gas, the escaping vapor gathers and rushes out through the narrow gap in a focused stream. Watch as these narrow streams become jets, fine plumes of gas and dust fountaining from the surface in bright, delicate arcs. They curve outward like slow silver ribbons, each one marking a place where sunlight has unlocked the ice below. Because the nucleus turns slowly on its own axis, each jet swings in and out of the light through a long cometary day. As a vent rotates into sunlight, it stirs to life, and as it turns back into shadow, it settles once more into quiet. Over time, these steady jets can nudge the whole comet, pushing ever so slightly against its path. The gentle thrust of escaping gas acts like the faintest of engines, gradually reshaping the wanderer's course across the years. Now the surface itself is slowly changing beneath all this activity. Each pass near the sun carries away a thin layer of ice and dust, and grain by grain the comet spins itself a little lighter every time it awakens. Picture the darker, dustier regions that the fleeing gas cannot lift, left behind as a crust across the ice. This blanket of loose grains insulates the frozen layers beneath, so awakening comes unevenly in patches across the wandering surface. Beyond the visible glow, sunlight quietly breaks apart the streaming water vapor into lighter fragments of hydrogen. These spread into a vast, invisible halo, far larger than the bright Coma, a ghostly cloud only special instruments can ever see. Consider how astronomers watch for this very awakening, tracking a comet as its fuzzy head first appears and swells. The brightening Coma is their signal that the ice has begun to sublimate, that a distant traveler has at last come alive. Each comet awakens in its own manner, some flaring early and bright, others staying dim and shy. The mix of ices within, the shape of the crust, the tilt of its spin, all decide how gently or how vividly a given wanderer will glow. Long ago, this same slow kindling happened on the comet's very first fall toward the sun, and it will happen again on every return. Yet each awakening leaves the traveler a little changed, its ices thinner, its story a shade deeper. Imagine the whole scene now, a small dark heart cloaked in a soft luminous head, laced with pale jets, drifting on toward the inner light. Silent and unhurried, the comet breathes out its ancient ice into the widening dark around it. Rest here in this gentle awakening, where frozen stillness turns to quiet radiance without haste or sound. The Coma glows, the jets shimmer, and the wanderer sails onward, growing brighter while you let yourself grow calm and ready for sleep. Tonight, return to the comet gliding sunward, its coma glowing like a pale lantern. As it warms, something new begins to stream outward, delicate threads of light lengthening behind it, and slowly the wanderer grows its shining tails. Notice a gentle rule that governs them all. A comet's tails never trail behind its path, but always point away from the sun. Whichever way the comet moves, sunlight and solar wind sweep its glowing veils outward, always away from the star. Picture the comet falling inward toward the sun. Hear its tails stream behind, trailing like hair in a current. Yet as it rounds the sun and climbs away, those same tails swing ahead, and the comet leads with its light. Look closely and you may see not one tail but two, unfurling side by side from the glowing head. Each is born of the same warmth, yet each answers a different force, and so they part into separate ribbons of color. Consider first the dust tail, broad and feather-edged, a pale golden veil curving through the dark. It is made of countless tiny grains loosed from the ice, each one catching sunlight and scattering it into a warm, hazy glow. These grains are so small that light itself can move them. Sunlight carries a faint, endless pressure, and though each push is impossibly light, together they nudge the dust outward, easing it back along a slow, graceful curve. The curve tells a quiet story of motion. Each grain, once freed, keeps a little of the comet's own path drifting behind as the comet races on, so the tail bends into a gentle arc, like a scarf trailing on the wind. Now turn to the second tail and see how different it looks. Straight and narrow, glowing a cool electric blue, the ion tail points almost exactly away from the sun, like a taut thread drawn out into the night. This tail is made not of dust, but of gas, its atoms losing electrons under the sun's ultraviolet light. Stripped this way, they become ions, and now they answer a swifter, more restless force flowing out from the star. That force is the solar wind, a thin stream of particles blowing endlessly outward from the sun. It sweeps the comet's ions along with it, carrying them straight away from the star at astonishing, silent speed. The solar wind carries the sun's magnetic field woven through it, and this is why the ion tail runs so straight. The field lines guide the glowing gas like rails, holding it in a slender, luminous line pointing outward. Its blue is a light all its own. Ionized carbon monoxide within the gas, lit by sunlight, releases a faint sapphire glow, so the ion tail shines with a hue no dust could borrow, cool and clear against the black. Between the two tails lies a quiet difference of light. The golden dust simply mirrors the sun, shining with borrowed daylight, while the blue gas glows with a light of its own, kindled by the sun, two glows born of the same small world. Imagine the length of these tails as they reach their fullest. Streaming from a nucleus only kilometers wide, they can unfurl across tens of millions of kilometers, a glowing road so long it dwarfs the little world that casts it. Yet for all their vastness, these tails are thinner than almost anything on Earth. The gas and dust spread so widely that each stretch of tail is nearly empty, a glowing emptiness you could pass through and scarcely notice. Somewhere in this slow unfurling, the tails are always being remade. The old dust drifts away and is lost, while fresh grains and gas pour from the warming ice, so the tails flow like a river, endlessly renewed. Watch how the tails behave like a weather vane in the sky. As the comet swings around the sun, its tails swing too, forever turning to point away from the star, tracing the invisible line between the comet and its distant star. From Earth, the two tails often seem to open like a fan. The straight blue thread and the curved golden veil lean apart at a widening angle, and between them the dark sky shows through calm and deep. At times the blue tail trembles and breaks. A gust in the solar wind can pinch it loose, and a whole length of glowing gas floats free into the dark, while a new tail quietly grows to take its place. Together against the stars, the comet becomes a thing of layered light. The pale gold curve, the slender blue line, and the bright head between them. It hangs in the dark like a brushstroke left unfinished. See too that a comet's tails are a kind of compass. Trace the blue thread back to its source and it always leads the eye toward the sun, a silent arrow written across the heavens, forever pointing home. Far out beyond the sun once more, the comet climbs back into the cold, and now its tails run ahead of it. Where once they trailed, they lead, streaming into the dark like banners carried before a traveler. Slowly, as the warmth falls away, the tails grow faint. The ice cools, the gas thins, and the golden veil and blue thread dim together until only the small, dark heart is left, gliding on alone into the returning cold. Rest now with the image of those two tails, one gold and curved, one blue and straight, both pointing forever away from the sun. They are the comet's quiet signature on the sky, written in light and soon to fade into sleep. Tonight, let your thoughts drift outward to a lone wanderer of ice and dust, a comet that has circled our sun for ages. It returns again and again along the same long path, faithful as a tide moving through the quiet dark. Imagine England 3 centuries ago, where a thoughtful astronomer named Edmund Halley gathered old records of bright comets seen across the years. He noticed that several sightings shared a strange family resemblance, arriving in a rhythm too regular to be mere chance. Picture the quiet leap of understanding that followed his study, rather than fleeting strangers. Some comets were loyal travelers, each return the same object come round once more, tracing a vast loop that carries it far beyond the planets and back home. Consider the quiet boldness of his claim. Halley studied the comet of his own era and foretold that it would return many decades later, near the year 1758, long after he himself would be gone from the world to see it. Now imagine the cold winter sky when that promised return arrived quietly on schedule, faithful to his careful mathematics. Halley had died years before, yet the comet kept its appointment, and grateful astronomers gave his name to the luminous visitor forever after. Here is the steady heartbeat of its long journey. Roughly every 76 years the comet swings in close to the Sun, then withdraws into the outer dark. A single human life might glimpse it once, perhaps twice, if the years align kindly. Long ago, watchers in ancient lands wrote of this same comet in their chronicles, marking its arrival among their most memorable nights. For more than 2,000 years, generation after generation has recorded the very same light crossing the very same sky. Empires rose and faded between its distant visits, yet the comet always returned faithful and familiar. The light you might one day see is the very same the ancients saw, indifferent and constant, tracing its wide and silent road through the dark. Picture a long embroidered cloth, the famous Bayeux tapestry, telling the story of a great conquest in the year 1066. Woven among its scenes is a streaking star with a flowing tail, the very same comet, sewn in wool by wondering hands. Imagine those medieval onlookers gazing up as the comet blazed above their darkened fields and towers. To them it seemed a sign woven into the fate of kings, though it was simply their old celestial neighbor, keeping its ancient and reliable appointment. Now travel forward to the year 1986. The comet's most recent passage through our own neighborhood of planets. This time, humanity did not merely watch from below. We sent machines outward to meet it, carrying our curiosity into the cold beyond. Somewhere in that darkness, a small craft called Giotto flew close, threading through the comet's veil of dust and gas. It aimed its instruments at the glowing heart of the visitor, seeking the solid body hidden within that bright and streaming haze. Consider what Giotto revealed at the comet's very core. A dark, peanut-shaped nucleus, blacker than coal, no wider than a modest city. This small mountain of ancient ice and dust is the true quiet body from which the vast bright tail unfurls. Picture something you might expect to gleam like fresh snow, yet the nucleus drinks the sunlight and stays profoundly dark. A crust of sooty grains cloaks the ice beneath, so this bright-tailed wanderer hides one of the darkest surfaces we have ever seen. Slowly, as the comet nears the warmth of the sun, its frozen surface stirs and releases gas and fine dust into space. Sunlight and the solar wind sweep this haze into a long luminous tail that always streams away from the sun. Beyond the beauty lies a quiet truth of loss. With every passage, the comet sheds a little of itself, dust slipping free along its ancient orbit. Across the ages it slowly thins, spending its substance to paint those brief and glorious skies. Here is a gift the comet leaves behind for us. The dusty trail it sheds still lingers along its path, and twice each year Earth glides through it, kindling gentle meteor showers, faint sparks that are flakes of Halley burning high above. Notice how the comet measures out time in human generations rather than in years. A grandparent who saw it as a child may tell a grandchild to watch for its next return, one family, one comet, linked across a lifetime of waiting. Now let your mind reach forward toward the year 2061, when Halley's comet is due to return once more. Somewhere a child alive tonight may stand beneath that distant future sky and watch the same faithful light their ancestors once beheld. Far out past the great outer planets, the comet coasts now through cold and lightless space. At the loneliest stretch of its whole orbit, it moves slowly there, turning homeward by degrees, already bound on the long fall back toward the sun. Trace the shape of its great path, a long and stretched ellipse that reaches from near the sun to the frozen outer dark. Bound forever by the sun's steady pull, it can never quite escape, and so it always comes back. Imagine the comet as a slow thread stitching the centuries together, touching the sky of the ancients, the medieval, and our own. Each return ties a knot in the long ribbon of history, binding distant lives beneath one shared and wandering light. Here is the quiet comfort in its faithfulness. Whatever unfolds across the years between, the comet holds to its ancient promise and returns. It asks nothing, forgets nothing, simply keeps circling, a steadfast wanderer honoring an appointment older than all our stories. Tonight, let the thought of that faithful visitor settle over you like a calm and distant tide. It travels on through the dark while you rest, certain to return, and you may simply breathe and drift and let quiet sleep carry you. Tonight, let your gaze drift to the rarest of visitors, the great comets, those few that grow so bright they stop whole cities and stir the quiet in every chest. They arrive perhaps once in a generation, unhurried and luminous. Imagine standing beneath a spring sky in 1997, when Hale-Bopp hung above the rooftops like a lantern that would not fade. For 18 unhurried months it stayed visible, longer than any comet ever recorded, a slow companion to the seasons. Picture its twin tails spread wide, one of golden dust curving behind it, the other a straight ribbon of blue-white gas. Hale-Bopp's core was unusually large, and that great size fed a glow the watching world could share. Consider how a comet earns the title great, not by nearness alone, but by a rare meeting of size, closeness, and a path that carries it beside both sun and earth at once. Such alignments are gifts of chance, seldom repeated. Now turn the clock to the summer of 2020, when a comet called Neowise slipped into evening view. Discovered only months before by a space telescope hunting warmth in the dark, it swept close to the sun and survived. Many who watched Neowise had never seen a comet before, and there it was low in the northwest, a soft brushstroke of light above the fading dusk. It hung there for weeks, unhurried, waiting each night to be found again. Far to the south in early 2007, an even brighter wonder had already appeared. Comet McNaught blazed so strongly that keen eyes could find it in broad daylight, close beside the sun, the brightest comet seen in over 40 years. Beyond the sunset, southern skies then unveiled McNaught's crowning glory, a vast dust tail fanned across the heavens in bright curving bands. Like the ribs of a great feather, it stretched wide, catching sunlight long after the sun had gone. Those fanning bands were countless grains of dust, each following its own slow orbit, spread apart by sunlight into delicate striations. Together they painted a shape so grand that sailors and city dwellers alike stood still to watch it shine. Long before these, in 1976, Comet West rose in the pre-dawn dark with a broad, bright tail split into glowing sections. Few had been told to expect it, yet those who woke early found the sky quietly transformed. As West rounded the sun, its icy heart cracked into several pieces, and this breaking released fresh clouds of dust that brightened its tail. What might have dimmed it instead made it lovelier, a fragile thing shining as it came apart. Each great comet is a passing stranger, and no two wear the same light. Some glow steady for months, some flare and fade in a week, their brilliance set by how much ice awakens and how near the sun they pass. Somewhere in every century, one of these travelers arrives unannounced, too new and too distant to have earned a name until it nears. Astronomers cannot always promise them. The greatest are often the ones no one saw coming. In older times, such sudden lights unsettled those who saw them, for a sky thought changeless had suddenly changed. A blazing tail where none had been seemed a message written overhead, and many read in it warning rather than wonder. Kings and farmers alike once watched these apparitions and wondered what they foretold, tying them to floods, to harvests, to the fates of thrones. We know now they foretell nothing, and somehow that makes their beauty freer to enjoy. Where fear once stood, understanding now takes its place, and the great comet becomes simply what it always was, sunlight and ice and dust drawn briefly close. The old unease has faded, yet the awe it stirred remains. Return in thought to Hale Bop's long visit, how it became a fixture of the evening, greeting families at dinner and travelers on the road. Night after night it waited, so steady that some almost forgot it would ever leave. And leave it did, for every great comet is only passing through, its bright hour a small arc of a journey lasting thousands of years. It fades not because it ends, but because it turns again toward the cold and distant dark. Out beyond the planets, McNaught still travels, carrying its scattered dust along a path so vast it may not return for many thousands of years, if it circles home at all. The tail we admired has long since thinned into the quiet between the stars. Yet the memory of these visitors lingers far longer than their light. A great comet seen in childhood can stay with a person for a lifetime. A single silver evening recalled decades later, still bright behind closed eyes. Across the world, when such a comet appears, strangers gather on hilltops and rooftops, drawn together by a light none of them arranged. For a while, the ordinary sky becomes a shared and unhurried marvel above every upturned face. Perhaps that is the truest gift of the great comets, not prophecy or portent, but the simple pause they ask of us, a reason to look up and grow quiet. They arrive rarely, and they make the night feel wide. Even now, unseen and unnamed, the next great comet may already be falling inward, gathering the first faint warmth of a sun still far away. Its brightening is a slow secret, kept until the evening it chooses to appear. So let the great comets settle into your quiet mind as gentle proof that the sky still holds surprises rare and radiant and kind. Somewhere one is coming, in no hurry at all, and you have only to rest and wait. Tonight, let your gaze float upward on a warm summer night, where the dark sky waits in stillness. In the quiet minutes before sleep, a single thread of light draws itself across the black, then fades, and everything holds its calm. That brief streak has a gentle name, a falling star, though nothing truly falls, and no star has moved at all. It is only a speck of comet dust meeting the air, glowing for an instant, then giving itself back to the night. Imagine the path a comet leaves behind as it loops around the sun, a faint highway of grit and dusty crumbs strung along its orbit. Long after the comet has gone, that trail lingers, drifting in a slow ribbon through the empty dark. Picture Earth on its own steady circle, unhurried and sure, sweeping through space at a pace it has kept for billions of years. Each year it crosses these old comet trails, gliding into the dust like a shoreline meeting a tide. When our world enters one of these streams, the tiny specks arrive high above you, most no larger than a grain of sand. They meet the thin upper air near 80 kilometers up, and there in a breath they turn to light. Consider how little it takes to make such brightness. A crumb lighter than a raindrop, moving swiftly through the atmosphere, heats the air around it until that thin sleeve of gas begins to glow, tracing the line you see. The speck itself rarely reaches the ground. It burns away far overhead, spending its whole small life in a single luminous stroke. What you watch is not the dust, but the air it warms, a glowing wake written across the dark. Now let your eyes rest on the shape of it all. Because the dust moves along one shared path, the streaks seem to spread outward from a single point, as though the sky were quietly breathing them into being. Skywatchers call that point the radiant, a place among the stars from which the meteors appear to fan. It is a trick of perspective, like train tracks narrowing toward a distant meeting, the parallel trails drawn together by sight alone. Each shower is named for the patch of sky its radiant marks, borrowing the constellation that happens to lie behind it. So the falling lights of one dark night carry the name of the stars they only seem to leave. In the deep of August, Earth sails through the trail of a comet called Swift-Tuttle, and the Perseids arrive. Their radiance sits within Perseus, and on a dark, moonless night the meteors come steadily one after another, calm and bright. Somewhere in mid-November, our world meets the dust of Comet Tempel-Tuttle, and the Leonids appear from within the lion. Most years they fall softly, and few, yet now and then the stream thickens into a quiet rain of light. Far more famous is the comet those Leonids trace, for Temple Tuttle rounds the sun only once in 33 years. Each pass lays fresh grit along the road, and when Earth crosses a young trail, the shower can bloom into wonder. Long ago, another comet threaded this same sky, the one you already know by name, Halley, faithful and old. Twice each year Earth glides through its scattered dust, and the ancient traveler leaves us gifts of falling light in its absence. In late October, those crumbs of Halley become the Orionids, streaming from beside the great hunter Orion. They are swift and delicate, brief silver marks near his lifted club, small echoes of a comet that will not return for decades. Then in early May, the same comet gives again, and the dust falls as the Eta Aquariids before dawn. So a single wanderer, though far away in the cold, still writes across our nights from both sides of its long orbit. Picture the long ages woven into every shower, the way each glowing streak is a fragment shed lifetimes ago. The comet that made tonight's light may have passed this way when the first cities were only quiet ideas in the dark. Some nights the sky is generous, offering a meteor every minute or two, and you lose count without minding at all. Other nights it holds back, and a long, still hour rewards you with one slow, unhurried line of gold. Here is the ease of watching them, for you need nothing but your own eyes and a little darkness away from the city glow. No lens, no chart, only a blanket, a wide view, and the willingness to let time soften. Let your sight rest not on the radiant, but on the whole spread of the sky, where the longest, loveliest streaks tend to appear. The meteors nearest that point look short, while those out at the edges draw the grandest arcs. Slowly your eyes adjust to the dark, and the fainter meteors begin to reveal themselves, threads you would have missed at first. The sky deepens, the stars multiply, and the falling lights arrive more often than you thought they could. Now and then a brighter one blazes, a fireball trailing color, green or amber, lingering a heartbeat longer than the rest. It leaves a faint glowing trail behind it, a thread of light that hangs, then dissolves into the quiet. Beyond the beauty lies a simple truth to hold as you rest, that each streak is a piece of a comet becoming part of our air. The falling stars are ancient comet dust returning at last to the world below. So let the meteors fall while you drift towards sleep, each one a small silent visitor from a wanderer far out in the cold. There is nothing to catch and nothing to keep, only light arriving and the calm of watching it come. Tonight, imagine a small traveler crossing the great dark between the stars, a wanderer with no home and no destination. For ages beyond counting it coasted alone, carrying the silence of another sun toward our quiet corner of the sky. In the autumn of that year, an astronomer in Hawaii noticed a faint point of light moving where nothing was expected. It had slipped in from the deep, unannounced, and the telescope that found it watches the heavens for such strangers. They gave it a Hawaiian name meaning a scout, a messenger reaching out from the distant past. The word suits it well, for here was the very first visitor ever confirmed to come from beyond our own family of planets. Picture it as a shard of some far world, reddish and dark, its color deepened by long ages of exposure to cosmic rays. Nothing near our sun had ever worn quite that hue, and so it drew the watching eye at once. Consider its curious shape, far longer than it was wide, tumbling end over end through the void. Astronomers had never seen a natural body so elongated, and its slow turning made its brightness rise and fall like a distant heartbeat. The changing glow told its story without any words. As it turned, sunlight caught first a broad face and then a narrow edge, dimming and brightening in a steady rhythm that hinted at a form stretched strangely long and thin. By the time it was found, the wanderer had already rounded the sun and begun its long departure. It had come from the dark, swung close to our star, and was even then turning outward, homeward to nowhere in particular. Follow the path it traced, not the closed loop of a comet bound forever to the sun, but an open curve that bends just once and never comes back. Its speed was simply too great for our star to hold. A body born to the sun follows a closed ellipse, tracing the same road again and again across the long years. That this one would not return was the surest sign of all that it had been born beneath some other star. Somewhere in the depths of time, it came loose from the star that made it, cast out into the wide galaxy. For untold spans it fell through emptiness, until chance drew it down at last toward the warmth of our sun. Here was perhaps the strangest part of all. As it neared the sun, it grew no bright veil of dust, no long glowing tail streaming behind it, the way an ordinary comet would when its ices warm and rise away. And yet it did not move quite as gravity alone would carry it. Some faint extra push seemed to nudge it along, subtle and unexplained, as though a whisper of escaping gas or sunlight itself leaned against its tumbling form. Such quiet puzzles are the delight of science, not its worry. Careful minds gathered what little light there was and weighed each possibility, content to let the mystery rest where the evidence ran thin, without straining after any easy answers. Some imagined it a splinter of rock and metal, others a lonely fragment of frozen world stuff, its ices long since spent. A few wondered aloud at stranger shapes, yet all agreed on one thing: it had come from far away. Long ago, before there were any eyes to see it, this piece of another world was already old. It may have wandered the galaxy for an age far longer than our sun has shown, passing countless stars it never once touched. Imagine the vast quiet it crossed to reach us. Between the stars lies emptiness so deep that light itself takes years to span it, and through all that darkness the wanderer fell, silent and unhurried, toward a single warm point. For a few short weeks the great telescopes followed it, gathering its fading light as it hurried steadily away. Every night it grew dimmer and more distant, slipping back toward the very darkness out of which it had briefly emerged. Then it was gone, too faint for any glass on earth to hold. Beyond the reach of every eye it sped on, carried by that unbound speed out past the planets, out past the last cold edge of the sun's dominion. Now it belongs again to the space between the stars, its brief visit already behind it. It will not turn around, will not circle back for another look, but will glide onward into the galaxy for ages still to come. Its coming taught us something quietly wonderful. The great voids between the stars are not truly empty at all, but seeded with countless drifting travelers, and now and then one of them crosses our small bright clearing in the dark. Countless others must surely pass by unseen, too dim or far too swift for us to catch. For every wanderer we notice, uncounted more slip by in silence, threading between the planets while the world below sleeps on quite unaware. Slowly the little scout fades into memory, a name and a curve on a chart, a handful of faint images kept safe, yet the wonder of it lingers, the knowledge that a piece of another star once came so near. Beyond our sky it travels still out where the sun is only one more spark among the multitude. It carries no message we can read, only its silent shape and the long story of the far place that made it. So let the first wanderer drift on through your thoughts as sleep draws near, a small reddish traveler bound for no shore. It came from the dark and returned to the dark, and somewhere out there it is journeying yet. Tonight, let your thoughts travel far beyond our own small family of comets, past the edge of the sun's gravity, into the wide dark corridors that run between the stars. Out here, ice remembers other suns, and the cold keeps every secret perfectly still. For most of history, every comet we watched belonged to us, bound to the sun by an invisible thread. Then one night a faint smudge appeared that owed the sun nothing at all, merely passing through on its long, unhurried way. Imagine astronomers in 2019 tracing that smudge across their screens and finding its path too open, too swift, to ever curve back. It had not fallen from the Oort Cloud. It had come in silence from somewhere far beyond. We named it Borisov, after the watcher who first noticed it, and what a gentle surprise it was, for this traveler from another star looked almost exactly like the icy wanderers born beside our own. Picture its soft, hazy coma glowing in the dark, a fine tail of dust and gas swept back by the sunlight, warmed awake by our sun just as our own comets are, a stranger yet somehow deeply familiar. Consider what that likeness whispers to us. Around a distant, unknown star, ice and dust once gathered into a small frozen body. In much the same faithful way our comets formed here, following the same quiet chemistry. Somewhere in its ancient past, Borisov was flung loose from its home system, cast out into the black by a passing tug of gravity. For countless ages it wandered, alone and cold, carrying its birthplace within. Then, by the smallest chance, its long path crossed ours. It brightened for a season, let us study its light, and slipped away again, never to return, bound once more for the endless space between suns. Now let your thoughts move forward a few years to 2025, when a third such visitor was found, catalogued with the quiet name 3I Atlas, another wanderer, threading through our neighborhood on a road that begins and ends among the stars. Here was something even stranger to hold in mind. When astronomers weighed its likely history, they wondered if this comet might be older than the Sun itself, an elder among elders, drifting since before our world was dreamed. Perhaps 7 billion years old, some studies suggested, born when the galaxy was young and our own solar system was not yet a whisper of gas and dust, a relic from an age we can scarcely imagine. Long ago, before the sun first kindled, this frozen traveler may already have been ancient, coasting through the dark while generations of stars were lit and in time, one by one, went out around it. Consider where such an old one might have formed. Astronomers traced its motion to the thick disk of the galaxy, a broad population of ancient stars far older than the Sun, moving in their own weathered, unhurried orbits. Picture that thick disk as a slow, dim swarm of aging stars spread through the Milky Way's broad wheel. From that ancient company, it seems, our visitor came, carrying chemistry brewed in the galaxy's early morning. Slowly, the meaning settles. These are not merely comets. They are messengers, small frozen letters written around other suns and delivered after eons to a sun that had no part in their making. Each one is a sealed vessel, holding the ice and dust of a world we will never see, preserved by cold so complete that little has changed since the moment of its distant birth. Beyond every star you can name tonight, such travelers are surely wandering, cast out from their own systems, roaming the long dark between the suns. Space is quietly full of them, most passing forever unseen. Far out there, the numbers grow gentle and vast. For every wanderer that happens to cross our small patch of sky, uncountable others slip by in the dark, silent, unnoticed, faithful only to their ancient momentum. Imagine how rare and lucky each meeting truly is. A comet from another star must travel for ages, and then thread the narrow needle of our sky, all so that we might glimpse it for a handful of nights. And yet, in under a single decade, we found 3. First Oumuamua, then Borisov, then the ancient one, Atlas, each a little proof that the galaxy shares its frozen children more freely than we once believed. Consider the tenderness in that thought. The same processes that shaped our comets shaped theirs, across unfathomable distance, Matter arranges itself in familiar ways, and ice becomes ice wherever the stars may burn. Somewhere, even now, another such traveler is falling toward us across the ages, still ages away, steadily keeping an appointment no one has yet made, unaware that anyone waits to see it shine. Picture ourselves, then, as watchers on a warm shore, catching brief sight of visitors from oceans we can never sail and letting them pass on with quiet gratitude for the little we were shown. So rest now with these ancient travelers in mind, older than the ground beneath you, older perhaps than the sun, drifting on through the calm dark, in no hurry at all, and neither tonight are you. Tonight, let your thoughts drift back 4 billion years to a young Earth still cooling, its surface a dark expanse of bare rock and slow glowing seams, waiting in stillness for the distant arrival of the seas that do not yet exist. Imagine that early world wrapped in a thin, restless sky, its cradle of stone perhaps too warm and too young to hold much water of its own. Much of the water you know may still have waited elsewhere, scattered across the dark as ice. Far out beyond that molten cradle, comets carried water frozen since the birth of the sun, locked in their icy hearts. Each was a small, dark vessel of frost, gliding inward on long orbits toward the newborn light. Picture the young solar system as a place still settling, where countless icy bodies and dark stones wandered on crossing paths. Now and then one fell inward, and the early Earth met it in a bright, silent touch. Long ago, over many quiet millions of years, this slow rain of ice and rock arrived again and again. Scientists call that distant era the heavy bombardment, though seen from far enough away it might resemble scattered, wandering light. Consider what each icy visitor carried within it. Not only frozen water, but a quiet chemistry of carbon, brewed in the cold of deep space over ages. These were the plain, simple ingredients from which living things are made. Deep in the dark between the stars, molecules gather slowly on grains of dust and ice. There, without haste, simple carbon compounds link and fold, assembling the humble beginnings of an organic chemistry older than the Earth itself. Now think of comets as slow, cold laboratories, holding these compounds unchanged for billions of years. Sealed in ice and shielded from the sun, their delicate molecules waited, preserved like pressed flowers between the pages of a frozen book. Somewhere in more recent times, a small spacecraft named Rosetta crossed the emptiness to meet one such traveler. After 10 years of chasing, it fell into a slow orbit beside a comet with a long and musical name. That comet, known as 67P, hung below the spacecraft like a dark, two-lobed stone, wrapped in a faint haze of escaping gas. Rosetta drew close and, gliding alongside, breathed in the thin cloud around it to learn its secrets. Here, in the faint mist rising from the comet's surface, the spacecraft found something gently astonishing. Among the water and dust floated glycine, one of the simple amino acids that living cells use to build their proteins. Slowly, let that settle in your mind, a fragment of the very stuff of life, drifting free around a comet far from any world. Alongside it lay phosphorus, another thread woven through every living thing you know. Picture those same ingredients ages ago, riding countless comets down toward the young Earth. Each arrival added its small measure of water and carbon to the warming world, like grains of seed scattered across freshly turned soil. Beyond the comets, dark asteroids brought their own share of water too, and scientists still weigh how much came from each. The truth is likely quiet and shared. Many hands, icy and stony alike, filled the empty basins of the seas. To read this ancient story, researchers compare the water in comets with the water in our oceans, measuring a faint fingerprint hidden in each drop. In some comets, the two match closely, hinting quietly at a shared and distant source. That hidden mark is the balance of two kinds of hydrogen, one a little heavier than the other. When a comet's water carries the same quiet ratio as the sea, it whispers that our oceans and its ice are kin. Imagine the first shallow seas at last collecting on the cooling earth, warm and dim beneath a hazy sky. Into that quiet water sank the gifts of the comets, dissolving unseen, mingling their old chemistry with the new. Consider how, over uncounted ages, those simple molecules met and joined in the sheltered warmth of early water. No single moment marked the start. Life gathered itself slowly from ingredients that had ridden the dark for eons. Now let the thought grow softly larger. The water that fills the oceans, that rises into clouds and falls again as rain, may carry within it a trace of ice that once traveled between the planets. Picture rain falling on a still meadow at dusk, each drop catching the last light. Some of those drops hold hydrogen born in the young universe, water shaped in the cold long before the earth had a face. Now turn that same wonder inward, toward yourself. Your body is mostly water, and each cell you carry is filled with it, so that some small part of you may be borrowed from the ancient ice of comets. Somewhere in the water on your lips, in the tears that come and go, atoms may linger that once rode a frozen wanderer through the dark. You are, in the smallest and truest sense, a little maid of comet. Let that idea rest over you, humble and calm rather than grand. The vast sky and the quiet body are not so separate after all. The same old water moves through the oceans, the clouds, and the warm tide of your blood. Tonight, as you settle deeper toward sleep, hold this quiet truth close. The rain, the sea, and you yourself are woven from the same wandering ice, and the comets, in their long, slow falling, may have helped seed the living earth. Tonight, imagine the peoples of long ago looking up at the same dark sky you rest beneath, and finding, without warning, a new light unfurled across the stars. To them a comet was a message, written in silver, arriving from somewhere beyond the known world. Picture a scribe in an ancient city, pressing careful marks into wet clay, noting the night a bearded star appeared. For thousands of years such sightings were kept like treasures, each one a small astonishment folded gently into memory. Long ago in many lands a comet was read as an omen, a sign that something in the world was about to turn. Kings paused, harvests were counted, and quiet crowds gathered on rooftops to watch the slow, luminous stranger glide overhead. Consider how the very word carries their wonder. For comet comes from an old term meaning long-haired, as though the sky itself had let down a shining, streaming lock of light above the sleeping towns and fields. In old China, watchful astronomers charted these visitors with remarkable care, sketching the different shapes of their tails across silk and paper. Their quiet records still help us today, threads of attention passed softly down the centuries. Somewhere in the medieval world, a weaver stitched a comet into a great embroidered cloth, marking the year it hung over a kingdom. That same faithful traveler, we now know, was Halley's, returning on its long and steady round. Now let the fear of those old omens loosen and fall away, for the light that once seemed a warning was only ice and dust, warmed by a distant sun, harming no one as it passed and shining only with the sun's borrowed light. Imagine how a single comet could unite a whole village in stillness, every face tilted upward, every voice hushed. Whatever people believed it meant, the shared act of looking was itself a kind of quiet, gathering peace. Far across the ages, comets have been recorded in ancient chronicles, pressed into coins and woven into stories told beside low fires. Each culture met the same light and answered it with its own gentle imagining. Here is the truth that would have amazed those ancient watchers resting now for you. A comet is not a warning at all, but a keepsake, a small frozen world that has scarcely changed since the planets were young. Picture the solar system in its earliest hour, a swirling cloud of ice and dust slowly gathering into worlds. Some of that first material never joined a planet, and it wandered outward instead, kept cold and whole in the dark. Slowly, over more than 4 billion years, those leftover fragments have circled far from the sun's warmth, deep frozen and undisturbed. A comet is one of them, a time capsule sealed by cold carrying the memory of the beginning. Consider what sleeps inside that ancient ice. Simple frozen gases, fine grains of rock, and delicate carbon-rich molecules, all preserved almost exactly as they were when the sun was newly lit and the earth had not yet formed. Because comets spend most of their lives so far from any heat, their interiors are barely touched by change. To study one is to read pages from the solar system's oldest chapter, still legible after unimaginable time. Now imagine holding in your mind a sample of that primordial dust, older than every mountain, older than the oceans, older than life itself. The comets those ancestors feared were quietly cradling the very stuff of our origin. Tonight, think of how the omen and the truth finally meet. For a comet truly is a messenger, though not of doom. It carries news from the dawn of everything, delivered in slow, shining silence across the sky. Beyond the reach of the old astronomer's eyes, we now send small craft to meet these travelers, drifting close to sketch their icy faces in far greater detail than any watcher on a rooftop ever could. Picture a spacecraft matching pace with a comet, hovering beside a dark, dusty world, no larger than a mountain, listening to the whisper of gases stirring as sunlight begins to warm its ancient surface. One such visit found grains of the same molecules that living things are built from resting untouched in cometary dust. The frozen keepsake, it turned out, held ingredients that would one day feel entirely familiar to us. Consider how tenderly this reframes those old sky signs, for what our ancestors watched with awe was carrying all along faint echoes of the recipe that makes a world like ours possible and a night like this one. Here on your pillow, let the long history settle over you like a soft blanket. Every generation that ever lived has looked up and seen these same slow lights and wondered and felt a little less alone. Imagine all those upturned faces stretching back through time, joined across thousands of years by one shared glance at a gliding comet. You are simply the newest of them, resting your eyes on an old and gentle marvel. Now the omens are quiet, the fear long gone, and what remains is only the calm astonishment that a lump of ancient ice can travel so far to remind us so tenderly of where everything came from. Slowly let the thought drift outward with the comet itself, a faithful little messenger of ice and dust, carrying the memory of the beginning as it fades once more into the peaceful, star-strewn dark. Tonight, imagine that we did not simply watch the comets pass, but chose to follow them. For all their distance and speed, we sent small machines to travel out and meet these wanderers, carrying our curiosity into the dark. Picture the quiet length of such journeys, years of drifting toward a single point of ice. A spacecraft is only a traveler too, keeping company with the same cold and silence the comet has always known. Long ago in 1986, when Halley's comet returned as it always does, a small fleet of spacecraft rose to greet it. Among them flew Giotto, aimed to pass closer to a comet than anything it ever dared. Imagine Giotto slipping through the comet's glowing coma, buffeted by grains of dust yet holding to its course. Behind a thin shield it carried a camera, sending home the first close portrait of a comet's dark, sleeping heart. There for the first time, Halley showed itself not as a smear of light, but as a solid thing, a dark peanut of ice and rock, venting bright jets of gas where the sun had warmed its skin. Consider how black that surface was, darker than coal, a wanderer wrapped in soot and shadow, yet from that darkness poured pale fountains of vapor, the comet breathing softly as it swung around our star and away. Now move forward to another mission, one that hoped not only to see a comet, but to touch it. Stardust set out to fly through a comet's veil of dust and carry a handful of it home. Picture a small paddle of aerogel, a foam so light it seems made of frozen smoke, held open to the passing storm. As comet grains struck it, each buried itself in the glass and came gently to rest. The comet was named Wild 2, and stardust met it in 2004, gliding past its icy cliffs and craters. Then it turned for the long fall back to Earth, cradling its precious cargo across the years. Somewhere over a desert in 2006, a small capsule fell from the sky and settled onto the ground. Inside lay real grains of a comet, older than the Earth the first ever gathered and brought home. Consider next a bolder idea still, a mission that would knock upon a comet's door to learn what lay beneath. Deep Impact carried a small copper probe meant to meet Comet Tempel 1 face to face. In 2005, the little probe let itself coast into the comet's path and met it in a soundless flash. Far from harm, this was a quiet question asked in light, opening a bright plume for the watching craft. Picture that plume rising slow and luminous, a fountain of ice and fine dust catching the sunlight as it spread. From its glow, the mission read the comet's hidden makeup, powder soft and fluffy, looser than fresh fallen snow. There the comet revealed how loosely it was built, a fragile mound of ice and grit barely holding itself together. Beneath the ancient crust lay material scarcely changed since the sun and planets first took shape. Beyond all these came the boldest journey of all, a spacecraft named Rosetta sent to travel beside a comet for years. Slowly it chased its target across the solar system, sleeping in the cold to save its strength. The comet was called 67P, or Churyumov-Gerasimenko for the two who found it, a name as unhurried as its orbit. After 10 long years, Rosetta at last drew near and slipped into step beside it. Imagine what it found waiting there, a small dark world shaped like a floating duck, 2 rounded lobes joined by a slender neck. Barely a few kilometers across, it turned in the sunlight, ancient and utterly still. Picture Rosetta circling close above this duck-shaped land, mapping cliffs and boulders, dunes of dust, and pits where jets breathed into space. For 2 full years it watched the comet wake as it fell toward the sun. Then, in 2014, Rosetta let go of a small lander named Philae, which eased down toward the comet's surface. For 7 hours it fell, unhurried in the weak pull of a world too small to hold it fast. So it was that Philae came to rest, the first craft ever to touch down upon a comet and stay. It bounced across the surface in the faint gravity before settling in shadow. A tiny visitor at last arrived. There on that dark shore, the little lander sniffed the comet's air and tasted its dust, finding water ice and grains of carbon. Among them lay organic molecules, the very stuff from which living things are made. When its long watch was done, Rosetta itself sank down to join the comet it had followed so far. Both wander on together now, machine and ice ball coasting outward into the cold and silent dark. Rest now among these wanderers we have come to know, the ice and dust, the long tails, the faithful returns. Each comet is a keeper of beginnings, carrying the memory of how our world was born. Let your thoughts drift out with them one last time, past the planets, past the sunlight, into the calm and endless dark. The comets travel on without hurry, and here warm and still you may finally rest.